Travis Decker was once known as the perfect family man, a devoted husband and father admired in his Washington community. But when his wife Amanda and their 2 children vanished during a weekend camping trip, that image shattered. What began as a search for a missing family quickly spiraled into a chilling investigation. As the FBI uncovered evidence that pointed not to a stranger in the woods but to Travis himself, behind the mask of a loving dad lurked one of the darkest betrayals imaginable. Travis Decker was the kind of man people trusted without hesitation. Neighbors waved when he mowed his lawn, coworkers respected his work ethic, and parents felt safe letting their children play at his house. To the outside world, his life looked almost flawless. He had a steady job in Spokane, a modest home filled with laughter, and a wife, Amanda, who was admired for her patience and kindness. Their 2 children were often seen riding bikes through the cul-de-sac, their father never far behind. Yet, beneath this polished surface, shadows lingered, shadows no one in the community could see. In late autumn, Travis suggested a family trip to a campground deep in the Washington wilderness. It was the kind of destination that promised peace and quiet, a chance to leave behind the noise of suburban life. Friends remembered Amanda mentioning the trip with little enthusiasm. She had seemed distracted in the days leading up to it, as though something was gnawing at her thoughts. Still, the family packed their gear, loaded up the SUV, and set out on what was meant to be a weekend of bonding under the stars. The campground itself was secluded, surrounded by thick evergreens that swallowed up sound. It was the sort of place where cell signals disappeared, leaving campers completely cut off from the outside world. To those who later investigated, the choice of location would appear carefully considered. It was remote, hard to access, and far from any watchful eyes. By Saturday evening, the Decker family set up their tent, lit a small fire, and seemed to settle into the quiet routine of camping. But when Sunday passed and no one returned home, concern spread quickly. Amanda's co-workers reported her absence on Monday morning, and calls to her phone went unanswered. The same day, a hiker wandering near the campground stumbled onto a disturbing scene. The Decker family's tent was torn open as if slashed from the inside, its flaps fluttering in the cold wind. The fire pit was long extinguished, with ashes damp from rain. Scattered gear suggested a hasty departure, but not a natural one. And then there was the blood, small streaks leading away from the campsite into the dense forest. Local authorities arrived quickly, but the case was unlike anything they had seen before. There was no sign of Amanda or the children. No footprints could be traced clearly in the soft ground. To investigators, it looked less like a family gone missing and more like the beginning of something sinister, something planned rather than accidental. The illusion of a happy family outing had collapsed into a chilling mystery. The FBI's involvement came sooner than expected, as local law enforcement realized the case demanded resources beyond their reach. The campsite had too many unanswered questions and too many inconsistencies. On the surface, it might have looked like a disappearance, but the details painted a darker picture. Amanda's belongings were carefully arranged, her jacket folded neatly on a log, yet her car keys were missing. The children's shoes, still tucked in the corner of the tent, suggested they had gone to sleep without knowing they would never wake up. It was a haunting image that raised more suspicion than sympathy. Forensic teams swept through the site, searching every inch of soil, bark, and ash. They discovered faint traces of blood along the slashed fabric of the tent. When analyzed, the fingerprints lifted from the weaponized blade were unmistakable. They belonged to Travis Decker. That single piece of evidence shattered the illusion that he might have vanished with his family. Instead, it suggested he had been the one to destroy it. Detectives turned their attention to Travis's movements. Surveillance footage from a gas station nearly 20 miles away revealed a troubling scene. Travis stood at the counter, his face tight, buying cleaning supplies and a gas can late at night. He was alone, no wife, no children, and no camping gear in sight. The timestamp matched the window of time when his family had likely disappeared. To investigators, the video was more than a coincidence. It was proof that Travis had slipped away from the campsite to prepare for something far more sinister. Further digging revealed another calculated move. Travis's phone records showed an abrupt gap, hours of silence during which his device was powered off. The pattern was clear. Someone who had nothing to hide would keep their phone on, but someone planning to erase their trail would make sure no digital footprint could follow them. These choices, deliberate and cold, made it impossible for investigators to see him as a victim. Instead, He was becoming their prime suspect. As suspicion grew, news of the case reached the public. A man once admired as a devoted father and husband was suddenly being whispered about as a murderer. The press gave him a chilling nickname, Killer Dad. The word spread quickly, shocking a community that had once seen him as a model of stability. For the FBI, this was no longer a search and rescue mission. It was the opening act of a murder investigation. The investigation into Travis Decker's life began to peel away the image of a stable family man and revealed a network of secrets, debts, and motives that few could have predicted. The first discovery came through his financial records. What looked like a modestly successful contracting business was, in truth, collapsing under unpaid bills and failed projects. Creditors had been hounding him for months, and repossession notices were piling up. Investigators uncovered that Travis had maxed out several credit cards and had recently taken out loans he had no realistic way of repaying. The picture of a hardworking provider was being replaced by that of a man standing at the edge of financial ruin. Insurance investigators added another unsettling layer. Amanda had recently signed an increased life insurance policy at Travis's urging, making him the sole beneficiary. The timing was damning, as the new policy had been activated just weeks before the family trip. The FBI began to consider whether this outing to the Washington campground had been less about relaxation and more about opportunity. A staged weekend retreat, far from witnesses, provided the perfect cover for a crime rooted in desperation. As the probe deepened, neighbors and acquaintances came forward with stories that cast Travis in a different light. A family friend admitted Amanda had confided about wanting to leave her husband, though she had hesitated because of the children. Another recalled hearing arguments late at night through the open windows of the Decker home, sharp bursts of anger that contradicted the smiling man seen outside in the daylight. These testimonies suggested Amanda may have been planning an escape that Travis couldn't afford to let happen. Divorce would leave him with nothing: no money, no home, and no control. Meanwhile, FBI profilers built a psychological portrait that matched the emerging evidence. Travis was described as a man who thrived on control, whose charm masked an underlying volatility. To the outside world, he had been the dependable father, but inside the walls of his own home, pressure had been mounting like a ticking clock. Each financial setback, each sign of Amanda pulling away, pushed him closer to a breaking point. Without bodies, the case still lacked its most critical proof. Yet every uncovered document, every whispered account, and every financial trail seemed to scream the same conclusion. Travis Decker had viewed his family not as the people he loved, but as obstacles standing in the way of his survival. The case against Travis Decker took a dramatic turn when hunters stumbled upon a grim discovery in the Cascade Mountains. Beneath layers of pine branches and loose soil lay shallow graves, hastily dug and poorly concealed. Inside were the bodies of Amanda and the two children, their remains confirming what investigators had feared all along. The family had not vanished into the woods or fallen victim to a wild animal. They had been murdered. Forensic pathologists determined that all three had died from blunt force trauma, their injuries consistent with an attack carried out with a heavy object. The brutality of the act erased any lingering doubts about the nature of the crime. The location of the graves linked directly back to Travis. Soil samples taken from the burial site matched the dirt and pine residue later found on his boots and in the wheel wells of his SUV. The graves were not the work of someone unfamiliar with the terrain. They had been chosen by someone who knew how to access remote areas quickly and leave without attracting attention. This was not a random act of violence. It was calculated, rushed, and carried out under the cover of isolation. Investigators soon uncovered an even more chilling layer to the story. While searching Travis's home, they found a hidden storage unit key taped beneath a desk drawer. When the FBI opened the unit, the contents painted a disturbing picture. Inside were Amanda's purse, children's toys, and camping equipment that should have remained at the site. Each item was a piece of the family's life, stripped from the crime scene and locked away as though Travis had wanted to erase or control the narrative of what had happened. To the investigators, this was more than evidence. It was a disturbing attempt at manipulation. The discovery of the storage unit became the final blow to Travis's claims of innocence. It revealed a man who not only committed the crime but also carefully collected and hid the remnants of his family's existence. This act of concealment transformed the case from circumstantial suspicion to undeniable proof. The FBI now had the bodies, the forensic evidence, and the hidden cache that tied everything together. As the news broke, The community that once celebrated Travis as a caring father recoiled in horror. The smiling contractor had become the face of betrayal. The campground that had promised family bonding was forever scarred as the backdrop of a meticulously staged crime. The trial of Travis Decker unfolded under the glare of national attention, every detail dissected by the media and every revelation deepening the sense of betrayal felt by those who once admired him. Prosecutors built their case step by step, presenting evidence that painted Travis not as a man who lost control in a moment of rage, but as someone who plotted his family's deaths with chilling calculation. The jury was shown the surveillance footage of him buying cleaning supplies and fuel in the dead of night, his face grim and expressionless. They were reminded of the phone records, the deliberate silence of those critical hours when his device had been powered off. Piece by piece, the story of a double life came into focus. Witnesses were called to the stand to expose the cracks in his perfect facade. Financial experts testified about his mounting debts and looming bankruptcy, showing how each overdue bill drove him further into desperation. Friends of Amanda told the court about her growing fear, about her hints of leaving the marriage and starting over with the children. The most damning testimony came from a neighbor who recalled Amanda confiding that she felt something bad was coming, though she couldn't explain why. Her words echoed like a prophecy inside the courtroom, reinforcing the narrative that Travis had acted out of fear of losing control and financial ruin. Forensic experts laid out the grim evidence from the Cascade graves. Soil analysis linked directly to Travis's boots, and fibers from the family's tent were found embedded in the clothing he wore that weekend. The hidden storage unit became the prosecution's most powerful weapon. Jurors stared at photographs of Amanda's purse, the children's toys, and the camping gear neatly stacked away in the dimly lit space. A disturbing collection that no grieving father would ever keep hidden. Travis sat expressionless throughout most of the trial, his silence unsettling to many who watched. The defense tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that grief and confusion explained his odd behavior, but the jury was not convinced. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, they returned with a swift verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence was life without parole, sealing his fate as one of the most despised figures in Washington's criminal history. The man once known as a loving father would forever be remembered as the killer dad, the husband who betrayed the trust of those closest to him. For the FBI, the case was a reminder that even the most ordinary family man could conceal a capacity for darkness beyond imagination.